Chad announced on Saturday that it will halve the number of troops deployed in February to the G5 Sahel anti-jihadist force in the three-border zone of Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, citing a strategic redeployment.
A contingent of 1,200 Chadian soldiers have been deployed to fight against jihadist groups as part of the G5 Sahel multinational force, which consists of a group of 5 Sahelian countries that includes Chad, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and Burkina Faso. These countries have been working together since 2017 to cooperate in this fight. The three borders area, along with central Mali, are the most affected by jihadist attacks. The deaths, both civilian and military, are counted in the thousands. The latest attack on Saturday against a village in Niger left 1,000 civilians dead. On Monday, another attack left 37 people dead. France, which is heavily involved in the anti-jihadist fight in the region, recently announced the gradual reduction of its military forces in the Sahel in favor of a smaller force of 2,500 to 3,000 men compared to the previous 5,000.
For some analysis on this, we are now joined by Advocate Evans Ogada, researcher and associate editor for the Platform for Law, Justice and Society in Kenya. Advocate Ogada, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Good evening, sir. Good to hear from you. Good evening to the viewers.
It's an absolute pleasure having you join us this evening, sir. What's your initial reading of Chad withdrawing half of its troops deployed in the Sahel region?
Well, this is a concern. It's a concern for the reason that the territory, the Sahel territory, is still volatile. And with France having decided to withdraw its troops to by half, we are going to have projected French troops to around 2,500, 3,000. The Malians reducing their contingent by half to around 600 is certainly going to be a problem in the Sahel. This is an area that has been, so to speak, a free operating area for extremist groups in West Africa. And for a while back, it was a concern of the United Nations, the European Union, and with these reductions, it's going to be a serious geopolitical problem and also global problem in light of what happened with Afghanistan just last week.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I mean, France is gradually withdrawing its military forces in the Sahel in favor of a much smaller force, with Chad now announcing a similar strategic move. Could we see the rest of the G5 Sahel multinational force following suit?
Yes, that is a possibility. Remember, Chad under Idriss Deby, and for that reason, the late Idriss Deby quoted a lot of Western support for being in the forefront of supporting the G5 Sahel coalition. France not actively participating, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a very difficult area to police. Remember, the Sahel region is a vast territory that has been facing serious jihadist activity. We have this also mirroring what we have around the Lake Chad region, because Chad is also facing its own rebel problem around the Lake Chad region with Boko Haram and the splinter Boko Haram affiliates. So it's going to be a very untidy mess. And I cannot imagine if support does not come immediately for the G5 or the remnants of the troops. I see the others wearing out and eventually pulling out. This coalition will eventually collapse, in my view, if nothing happens soon.
Now, Advocate, the reduction of troops in the Sahel by France and now Chad does not necessarily make sense in light of the continuing violence in the region. So is the retreat an admission of failure by these countries in quelling the violence in the vast and the largely unmanned region?
Well, it's quite befuddling in my view, because, for example, with the French, I would have expected the French government and Macron to have been more proactive. It does not make sense for them to have pulled out at this hour. And you can see this mirroring the fatigue that the Americans had with Afghanistan and pulling out, and Afghanistan basically going back to status quo ante, whereby rebel forces have what, so to speak, a gangster's paradise. It doesn't make sense. I would have expected a more structured engagement, and France has been cutting down in terms of resources that it has committed to help out in the West African region. I think it doesn't make sense, because this withdrawal makes that region more unsafe, and that ties also to the migrant problem that the European Union has been trying to help. Something needs to change. It doesn't make sense.
Can comparisons be drawn between what happened in Afghanistan with the US troops withdrawing after 20 years to what's currently happening in the Sahel region with the French and the Chadian troops withdrawing?
Of course, yes. The comparisons are there. The Taliban and the rebels, the extremist groups operating around the Sahel and by extension the Lake Chad region, they are animated by extremist Wahhabi ideology. These are people who believe to want to create Islamic caliphate. So the motivating factor is similar to what we have with the Afghanistan problem, whereby the Taliban have already announced the formation of the Islamic Caliphate of Afghanistan. Now, the withdrawal also bears similarity. The West, that is currently resource-starved and with the wariness of their domestic populations, are trying to pull back from international engagement. But you see, that kind of withdrawal, the haphazard, not well planned, not well thought out withdrawal, is going to cause more trouble. For our local situation in Mali and in the Sahel, that means this problem tying to Libya, which is... Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. We lost you there for a second. Yeah, please proceed.
Thank you. I was saying that the problem in the Sahel region will definitely join to the problem we have in Libya. We have been trying to stabilize Libya. Now, you destabilize Libya, you destabilize the whole of North Africa, and that now becomes a problem for Europe. It is a problem. It's a serious problem. I don't know why this was let to go the way it went.
Yeah. And the unrest and the violence in the Sahel has been a long-standing issue, no doubt. But what, in your view, then, should be done in that region to bring about peace and stability?
Number one, the Sahel region has been experiencing inter-community fights that these extremist groups, the IIS, Islamic State in West Africa, Al-Qaeda, have been taking advantage of and fomenting trouble. We need to deal with those insurgent groups. There needs to be more in terms of investment, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education for the local population, in terms of resourcing these governments. It's important. The World Bank has tried to invest in one or two projects. The private arm investment of the World Bank, the IFC, has been trying to promote private corporation investment in the region. That's not enough. We need to see a more concerted engagement, not only at the regional level, but also at the Security Council level. The West is always reacting to things after they've blown out. Something needs to happen so that we safeguard whatever semblance of order that is there before this becomes a full-blown catastrophe.
And what should be the role of the African Union then? Because they seem to be quiet on the developments in Chad, because the last we heard from the African Union was back in April, when they were calling for an end to the military rule after the death of President Idriss Deby.
Well, the African Union seems to be going back to the old OAU, Organization of African Unity, whereby what it could do best was call and make clarion calls for truce and such kind of pronouncements. This is the 21st century. The African Union has a peace and security mandate. It needs to be more proactive. I will expect the big brothers of Africa, the Nigerias of this world, the South Africa, the region, ECOWAS, the regional bloc, definitely the whole of Africa. Something needs to happen, even in terms of calling for an emergency meeting to safeguard the region, because once Sahel blows up, it will be a problem for the whole of Africa.
All right, Advocate, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your analysis on this matter.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, that was Advocate Ogada. He's a researcher and associate editor for the Platform for Law, Justice and Society in Kenya.